Welcome to Conversations with Lynn. And this today's session is about women in ministry and being called not just to serve in the background, but being able to really work in the fivefold ministry: prophets, teachers, evangelists, pastors, apostles, that we are all called. And it doesn't matter if you're a female or a male, we are all called to minister. And today's conversation is all about being alive in who you are, emerging, and being who God's called you to be. So help me welcome Cari to the conversation. It's going to be powerful. Hey, Cari, welcome to Conversations with Lynn.
Hi, Lynn. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm actually in Atlanta and I'm in my a hotel room. So, of course, this won't air while I'm in Atlanta,
Yeah,
but I'm here for the Emerge conference.
amazing. These ladies
Yes.
better be ready for something good.
Listen, prayed up, fired up, and I just know it's going to be powerful. But thank you for taking some time out this morning.
You're
I know
welcome.
you're a busy mom and doing all the things. I do have one slight problem. It's just like I woke up this morning with a zit and I thought, "Look, I'm talking to Cari on over Zoom when she should be here fixing this like
I should be
problem,
with you.
this problem."
You look beautiful, as
I,
always. Don't even
I,
worry about it.
I did everything I could. I was just like, seriously, we're
Always when you don't want them.
always. And I thought being 50, I would be done with this. Like, why shouldn't I
I
not be getting zits now?
I think they lied to us. They always said it would end after puberty, but like, did it? Because I don't think it does.
Clearly, it doesn't because I have. Clearly, it doesn't. But
Yeah.
so Cari, I just want my audience to get to know you a little bit. So I'm just going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
That listen, guys, this ain't spiritual. This ain't. It's nothing. It's just funny. So, okay. So, have you ever played the game? Uh, Never Have I Ever?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to just do just a few minutes of Never Have I Ever,
Love
right?
that.
And we're going to get to know you just a little bit. All right.
Okay.
So, and I should have wrote these down. Wouldn't have been funny, but now you're going to see me really like trying to figure out what I'm going to say. So, um, have you ever um been out of the country?
Yes.
Okay. Um, have you ever Okay, this game's not working because I don't have any fun questions.
That's all right. I went to China to see my brother.
China. Okay, so that's
Yeah,
how long a flight was that?
14 hours. 14 hours. I went with my sister. And we stayed for 10 days and we went to Shanghai and Beijing. So I got to walk the Great Wall of China while I was there.
Well, that's really cool. Like,
Yeah.
how did you feel? Like, were you looking down thinking, I'm way too high for this?
Oh, I mean, yeah, you go up and you walk miles while you're there. So it was just a wild experience to like see the whole thing while you're at one part. You can like see across it and you just your mind is blown with how big it is and
Yeah.
how people built this with their hands.
I think about it all the time. I'm just like, if I would leave my house abandoned in
Yeah.
20 years, it would be like crumbly, condemned. No one would even be allowed to live in it. But
Mm-hmm.
here we have things from the ancient world.
And
And it's like,
still walkable. Still like thousands of people can go see this at a
yeah,
time and like it's wild.
we think we're so smart with all the tools and technology. And what we're using, like rock hammers, I don't know. So it's just amazing. But
Yeah.
yeah. Well, so you're a world traveler. Love it. 14 hours on a flight. Not quite. So when we go to South Africa, it's like 18 or
Oh,
something.
wow.
So I get those long flights. They're
That's a
crazy.
long one. Yeah.
But, have your compression socks, people. Have your compression socks.
Yes.
You need them. That is like
I can
travel tip
testify
number
to that.
one. Have your, definitely have your travel socks. But so, I just wanted to I remember we were out to lunch And we were just talking about women in ministry and like the struggles. And so what
Yeah.
I would love for us to chat about today is that exact thing. Like, it's hard to believe that there are still churches and denominations and ministries that don't allow women to really, I mean, they can serve from the floor,
Mm-hmm.
but not from the platform.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a passion for me. Like even
Yeah.
my Emerge conferences um, that I'm doing are all about women stepping out of the shadows and understanding who they are in Christ and what they're capable of. But yet there's churches that are saying the exact opposite. And so I would just love for people to hear your story and the challenges that you went through with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I've had a lot of people speak over me with prophetic words, and just even just say like, you are called to ministry, you're called to preaching, you're called to leading people in the gospel. And it's never been a surprise, because even as a child I knew I was called to ministry. um, and I luckily grew up in a church that really, it never suppressed women. They never like kept women down. I mean, I remember being in church, and if my mom had a word, like if God gave my mom a word, my pastor told my mom, like, I trust you. You come tell me in my ear, and then if like you go up and you deliver that word. And so it was one of those things where I got to grow up even watching my own mother um be used by God, and be able to speak her truth, or the truth that God gave her. And so I think as a child, I always knew that
Mhm,
God was going to use me. He gave me a mouth, he made me loud. He always kept me close to him.
mhm.
So I was never shocked when people would pray these things over me or speak these things over me. um but when I was about 20 years old, I met my husband in church that we had gone to for many, many years. But I was visiting and I met him and fell in love instantly. And he
I hear
was,
people are telling you that that's the one, and you weren't quite sure. Okay, so
yes, yes.
let's be
Well,
real
yeah,
here. It is real straight talk on Conversations with Lynn.
real talk. I had just gotten out of a relationship. I wasn't looking at any man. I was not. But my sister met my husband, and she said, "You're gonna marry that man." And I was like, "What? I don't know what you're talking about." Um, but ended up marrying him, and he has is incredibly talented in music. Can pick up any instrument, learn it in a day. Can sing like nobody's business.
Okay, I've seen him
And
play instrument. I've heard him play. Like, I can't wait to hear him sing.
yeah,
I
you
haven't
need to
heard
hear
that yet.
it. You need to hear that. Um, and so he's always been a part of church. He's always been a part of the worship team. He's always had a place.
Hmm.
Um, but for him, like it, he was always on that route. And so when we got married, and when you're in your 20s and you're like really chasing God, like you're young, you're going after this big call. You see, especially when you want to be in ministry, you're like, I'm gonna give up everything to do
Yeah, yeah,
this.
right,
I'm gonna
right.
like go, headstrong straight into that. And then you kind of, I found myself hitting wall after wall after wall. And it was, I would find a place, or, I was to the point where I was walking around saying, like, I'm Esther. Like, God, put me wherever you want. If that's children's ministry, I'll go. If that's welcome team, I'll go. If you need me to lead a Bible study, I'll go. Like, I'm Esther. I remember like saying that as a 20 something year old, of like, I'm going to be Esther. Like, if you ask me to do something, I'm going to do it, because I fully believed, and I still do believe this.
Yeah,
Like, when you use what's in your hand, God's gonna
right.
make that into, He's gonna fulfill your dreams, even though He's using just what's within your hand right now. And I did so much, but then I always felt like I was hitting this wall of like, this still doesn't feel like I'm getting to be used the way God wants to use me.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, people tell me I'm good at praying, but they don't let me pray. or
Mm.
I can host on the stage, but if I was never really, I was never really being led to being challenged and furthered in my call. And I was very honest about that. And I kind of started to realize that maybe in ministry, I didn't marry myself into my calling. I
Mhm.
had started to notice that a lot of the women who were allowed to speak, who were allowed to maybe preach a little or to pray or to like lead, had married the pastors, had
Mm.
married the men that were in those places. And even though my husband
Yeah.
was a worship leader, he wasn't a pastor. He's the kind of guy, he's like, I'm doing all the behind the things because that's where I want to serve. And I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, love that about you. Humble to the most ability that he could be.
Yeah.
But um I was like, wait, did I not do what I was like? Was I supposed to marry pastor? Is that how women get in the preaching game? Is that how we get to do spread the gospel? And I was so convicted that that was not true, because it's not, but it felt
Yeah.
completely true.
I mean, think
Um,
about it. Deborah was a judge leader in
yes,
Israel, right? But you
yes,
don't hear her husband wasn't doing that. They were
no,
going to see Deborah under the
yeah,
tree to find judgment and
yeah.
hear from the Lord.
Oh yeah, and I constantly like found myself in places where I was like, well, how did Joyce Myers get to where she is, and how did like Christine Kane, and I'm like thinking to myself like, okay, am I is this something that I'm doing wrong? And I constantly I found myself challenging myself, and honestly, I do believe that God called me close to him, and he did challenge me in private moments, and in things of times where I needed to learn about him and to learn his word and to learn him. And it wasn't that I wasn't getting that from him, but I wasn't allowed to utilize it.
Yeah.
Um, and so then I eventually joined the worship team, crawled out of my little like nervous box and did that. Um, and I felt like, okay, God's going to show me how to utilize a stage. You know what? If this is where he wants to serve, he wants me to serve, I'm going to serve here. So I, you know, did that. And I love leading worship. I think it's such a passion of mine. It's such, oh man, to drive in his presence, there's nothing like it.
Mhm.
But then there were times where I felt like God would, you know, I had this ability to even utilize prayer moments and really intimate moments. And it was almost like I was stopped.
Yeah.
Or, I would find the church, they would post really into like really beautiful moments that happened, but it was never a woman that did it.
Mhm.
Um, and
And
so I don't know.
that's not uncommon.
Yeah,
That's the sad thing. That's not uncommon.
it's not uncommon at all. And so at this church that we had been at for years, I had started to feel like I was in a box. I
Mhm.
was in a box. And, there were people actually like fighting for me in meetings, and they were like, utilize Cari, utilize, put her in this place. Like she's running your women's ministry and it's actually flourishing. And there were things about our women's ministry. There were times that our women's ministry was the most flourishing
Yeah.
part of our ministry, the little groups of it all. Men's ministry sometimes can, it just fluctuates, I think, but it shouldn't. And um, it was one of those things where I even heard people fighting for me, but I was in this box. Like I kept saying, like to my husband, I'm in a box and I don't know what to do. Like, and I kept questioning myself because of
Right.
it. Um, and so finally, I had heard from God, um, and it, you know, I fully believe that we served faithfully because God had us there. He had us serving there. And me and my husband had heard from God that there was going to be mighty changes in our world,
Mhm.
where he was, you know, he made changes in my husband's job. He made changes in us leaving this church that we called home for almost 15 years. And I heard first
Mhm.
before my husband, like almost a whole year before he heard. And I was like, okay, I don't really know what to do with this. I do know that as a wife, I want to respect my husband and like, I'm not going to force anything.
Mhm.
But I did find myself like, no, I don't know. Maybe this is like me. Like, because of where I was almost questioning whether it was from God because I just wasn't sure. Like, is this my emotions that I'm upset because I'm in this box? And
Well,
I like, I,
there's such a balance between that because you want to honor your husband because we do, regardless of where you feel you are called in ministry, it is, we believe our husbands are the head of our families, right? And we want to
mhm.
respect that. And you hear these things from the Lord and you're just like, okay, Lord, I need you to tell him
Oh,
because
yeah,
I don't want to disrespect. I don't want him to feel like I'm trying to assert authority where I'm not supposed to have it necessarily. But I am his help meet, right?
exactly.
We are a partnership. We are one. So
Yes,
where does the line, where do I cross that line and it's wrong? Where do it's such a judgment, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. I, I also, I know that God doesn't tell one spouse one thing and not the other. And, you know, something to be said about, especially with women, God speaks to women too. And so there's something to be said about him telling me first and me sitting with it and me trusting that God, you know, God came to Mary first, the angel came to Mary first, and then to Joseph. And so it was like one of those things where I'm like, okay, if this is what you want for us, this is
Right.
not going to be out of emotion. This will not be out of hurt. This will not be um, something that destroys relationships that were built there. Like, I am following God. And, you know, I believe that sometimes in that whole situation, I believe all the time in that whole situation that God really was protecting me,
Mhm. Yeah.
but he wanted to further me, not just Brendan. He wanted
Yeah.
to further me. And he actually used a woman who was newer to the church that I was at
Mhm.
to really speak that into me of, you know, when we had decided to leave, we, you know, my husband eventually he was like, hey, I believe that, you know, it's our time to go. So we're gonna step down first and then we'll leave. And that's how it happened. But I was like, oh yeah, God told me that a while ago. I'll do it. Like
Yeah.
I'm in with you. But God actually used this woman who I didn't know well, but I like from what I knew, I trusted. I mean, the spirit was on her 100%. It is on her still, but she was speaking in to me. And you know, I was telling her, I said, I think that God wants to do these mighty things in Brennan, and that's why we have to like step out. And she was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, God
Ooh,
told you first. And that's because he has
wow.
some mighty things he wants to use you for. She's like, you have a calling. You've known about your calling since childhood. If he's not taking just Brennan out to utilize him and to grow him and to further him, he's taking you out. And he told you first because you had some readying you got to do.
Yeah.
So preparations that need to happen
Yeah.
so that you can be ready and go off and fulfill this big call that he's placed on you.
Wow. There's two things that you said that I just want to revisit that I think
Yeah.
that people need to like, this is important. One, you were feeling some kind of way in all of this. You're recognizing that there's something not right here. They are honoring or utilizing people who are couples in ministry, but not
Mm-hmm.
people who are singles in
Mm-hmm.
frontline ministry. But you didn't use that as like, I'm not hearing from you, or even from when we talked about this before, you honored the ministry. You kept serving in the background,
Mm-hmm.
doing your best, doing 100%, even though you knew that something wasn't right. And I think
Yeah.
oftentimes people, we don't realize we're doing this. I don't think anyone, well, I'm sure
Mm.
there are some, but we get offended, we get upset. And rather than sticking with it and saying, this isn't for me anyway, this is for you, Lord, I'm going to honor my pastor. I'm going to honor the ministry that you have me in. I'm going to serve
Yeah.
faithfully, even if I'm not serving the way I feel you want me to serve. You
Mm-hmm.
you honored the ministry, you honored your leadership, and that's something that people have to recognize that sometimes things are going to happen and things aren't
Yeah.
going to go the way that you want them to go.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to make mistakes. Listen, people are going to do stupid stuff. They're going to say some stupid stuff, right?
Absolutely.
And we could either be offended and walk away,
Mm-hmm.
like the Pharisees with Jesus, right? He said some stuff and they walked
Yeah.
away. Or we could be like the woman who Jesus literally called her a dog and said,
Mm.
should I give the food that was meant for my people to the dogs? And
Mm-hmm.
she could have been offended and said, well, fine, I'm going elsewhere. But no,
Yeah.
she said, listen, but don't even the
Mm.
dogs get the scraps that fall from the table, right?
Her
And
faith.
she just said, I don't care. He can even try to offend me. And
Yeah.
and I think that was a test, right?
Oh,
Yeah, I think that
absolutely.
was a test. He was testing her. Are you going to
Mm-hmm.
believe and have faith even when something doesn't go your way? And
Yeah.
I see that in your testimony,
Absolutely.
that you were willing to fight through, do what you had to do until the
Mm.
Lord said, okay, I'm calling you out, not because you're upset, not because you're
Mm-hmm.
walking away, but I'm calling you out at this point because now you're ready.
Mm.
The
Mm-hmm.
other thing you said was, in the midst of this, you knew God was working on you.
Absolutely.
And how often do we not allow the Lord to work on us?
Yeah. I mean, how often do we not let him work on us when we're mad, when
Mhm.
we're not in the place we want to be? I was reminded this morning while reading my Bible, Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, not to hurt you, plans for a future and a hope. That prophecy that God gave to Jeremiah was for people that were exiled by God.
Yeah,
And he comes down and says, just so you know, you may not know the plan. You may have gotten on a plane in Pittsburgh, Lynn, and the pilot's getting you to Atlanta. You don't know how, but he's getting you to Atlanta, and that you're going to show up there. You're going to be fine.
right,
When we have the ultimate pilot, we may be
right.
in a place of suffering.
Hmm.
We may feel like we're in a place of exile. We may feel like we're in a place where we can't, there is no way we can see the outcome
Right.
and that outcome being good,
Yeah.
but God does.
God does. Yeah.
And he's absolutely going to show you, like, hey, I may not be able to tell you the plan, but I'm surely going to tell you it's good.
Yeah. There's a song Jason Upton wrote like years ago, and I don't remember all of the song, but there was one line in it, and it just played over and over in my mind. And it said that man builds bridges,
Mm-hmm.
but God made valleys. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
in those valleys, we think, oh, turmoil, all the stuff is going wrong. Keep me away from the valley. Build a bridge
Mm-hmm.
from mountaintop to mountaintop so that I could just be on the highs all the time.
Yep. Oh,
But
wow.
God created valleys because it's in the valley that
Absolutely.
we learn what's really in us,
Mm.
what character flaws need to be worked on, what do we need to learn. It's in those
Yeah,
valleys that we learn to trust God and not our own abilities. When we're on
absolutely.
the mountaintop and things are going great, we start to think that we can do it. We got
Oh,
this, we can handle it. But you get in that valley and you
yeah.
realize, oh, there's some stuff in here that needs to be dealt with. And what you're talking about right now is those valleys of life that we're struggling through. And we can rush the process.
Mm-hmm.
You can rush the process, but
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to have what you really wanted,
Mm.
what you're really called to when the process isn't done.
Yeah.
When it's not finished, you get a mediocre version of what was intended.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really funny. And even in the last few years of me being in that ministry, where I felt like I was in a box, God was still speaking to me. Like just like you're talking about in that valley, he was still having the people there prophesy over me, telling me, you're going to do this, even though they weren't letting me do it.
Hmm.
They were still, God was like, I'm still speaking this over you because I know that this is the truth. And one of the last things that I had really heard God really speak to me before we left that church was to write.
Hmm.
And I literally just heard those words, to write. And I was telling you this at lunch about how I was like, okay, you want me to write, but what do you want me to write? I mean, I would ask him, and I just heard write. And so the only thing that I could think to do was to read my Bible and to write down my thoughts.
Yeah.
And I was writing and writing and writing. And so in the midst of our transition, where we left and we, were church hopping, we were kind of trying to figure out where God was calling us next. And, at the same time, like my husband had also lost his job. And so it was a huge transition for us. And I was like, okay, like what is happening? And all I kept hearing was to write. And so I'm like, all right, I'm just going to read my Bible and I'm going to write. And so now, as things have changed, where my husband's career has changed, we found church home with you. And a lot of things have fallen into place where we really feel like, oh God, this is where you're putting us, this is where you have us. I still hear that word, to write.
Yeah.
And what I really started to figure out in just those words, to write, was that God really wanted to show me revelation. He was like, I've shared the call,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I've given you a voice to use, but I don't want you using other people's revelations.
Word, girl.
And so I was like, oh. And so I went from like, not, I went from reading devotionals that would lead me to like verses, to I'm reading books of the Bible and I'm writing down every single thing that I read that like comes to me. Because that, I mean, God's like, if you're gonna preach, you're gonna preach. And so
Right.
I need to reveal in you
Yeah.
what is gonna lead others and heal others
Oh
and
my God.
further others and challenge others, because the revelation that God gives to someone is their revelation to do with their call.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
yeah, it was just,
So
all
good.
I heard was to write. And
So
I heard it
good.
in the place that I knew I was leaving. So to say to skip a valley is to, you could skip revelation. And it's not worth
Yeah.
it. It's not
Yeah.
worth it.
It isn't. It isn't. We think about when our kids learn to walk, right? You're being a
Mm-hmm.
mom of a little one, mine are old. I still look at them thinking, weren't you just 5 years old like a couple months
Mm-hmm.
ago?
Mine's
Um,
about to be 5 in
yeah,
2 days.
so baby's is a big boy. Um, but they don't, there's actually in psychology, they talk in development where if your child did not crawl, okay, because
Mm.
sometimes that happens,
Yeah.
it's like they skip crawling and they go right to walking. There's actually a neurological problem with that. And they will take these children and say, make them during their sessions crawl, crawl,
Wow.
because it resets some things that were supposed to happen in the neurons and whatnot in their brain that they skipped doing. And because they
Interesting.
skipped that, there's some things in schoolwork that they can't connect like they should have been able to connect because they
Mm.
never formed the neural pathways in this stage of their life that's going to benefit them in this next stage of life, right?
Wow.
And they would actually have these kids who were 5, 6 years old, clearly walking fine, crawling around because it was forcing their brain to do some connections that they never had to do. And
Mm.
as you were talking about that, it was just like when we skip the valley, we skip these powerful lessons that were
Absolutely.
meant for us to be a story to tell, to help someone else find freedom,
Mm-hmm.
things in our lives to help us find freedom, but we skip that because we don't go through the process that we need to go to, from rolling around to rocking to doing that scoot. Remember that little scoot thing where they're trying to start to crawl, but they're not quite doing
Yeah.
it yet.
Yep.
To crawling, to stumbling, to walking. Everything has a process.
Absolutely.
And every bit of that process, though it doesn't make sense to us, we don't
Mm-hmm.
understand it. We don't know what it's for. It's there for a purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
when you skip it, you miss something that you're supposed to have. And I think as women watch this, or people are watching this, it's like, don't skip out on the process.
Yep. Absolutely.
Don't, the process is painful. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The process is no fun. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't have wine without the process of juice becoming the wine. There's a process,
Absolutely.
you know, there's a process. You can't go from um, crawling to walking without the process. Everything has a process.
Absolutely.
And when we allow ourselves that process, amazing things can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And and women are part of that process. Women get to be a part of God's process in the church and in ministry. And he in Genesis, he makes it clear that we are formed in his image, but we're formed to be a part of man, to form that connection with
Yeah.
man, and to be in that process together,
Hmm.
and to skip out on a whole gender
Hmm.
um is to skip
Yeah.
out on a part of God.
Yeah.
I think to I don't know. I think I just sitting on that, just it's just a reminder of like God, he poured intention
Yeah.
into making man, and he poured intention into making woman, and the differences of us that
And he didn't say it was
complete
good until there was both.
until and yeah, exactly. It was
It took both.
completion.
And then he said, now it's good.
Yeah.
Now it's
And
good.
I think that there's we I think that's where I struggled with in my 20s of like, oh, maybe that just means married people.
Yeah. Yeah.
um but no, I fully believe, like, in the church, in ministry, God has truly said, I'm going to use men and women. I
Right.
mean, who found Jesus at the tomb?
Women, women,
And what did he tell them to do?
go tell the men. They were the
Go tell.
women were the first evangelists, you know.
Absolutely.
They were the first to go share the gospel, the risen Savior.
Hmm.
And right. And I think one of the things that we have to remember as women is that when we have this mindset that we have to be linked to a man to be able to, it puts you in that cycle of you're looking for the spouse and not looking for the relationship with the Lord. Like
Absolutely.
find yourself striving over that perfect spouse,
Hmm.
but then neglecting really getting real with Jesus, falling in love with Jesus and him being your perfect spouse. Because ladies,
Yeah.
you ain't gonna find, first of all, you ain't gonna find a perfect
Nope.
spouse. Love my
Nope.
husband dearly.
There are no
There's
perfect men.
Yeah. But there are some times I said, you gave this man to me. Now you got to deal with him, right?
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
and if we're waiting for our spouse to complete us, they're never going to do that. They're
Nope.
never, it's not their role to complete who you
No.
are. So if you are not secure and know who you are in Jesus, that's not going to do it for you, you know. And
Absolutely.
there's so many when you really start reading the Bible
Hmm.
and not just waiting on someone else's revelation. There are so many women in the Bible, like Lydia. She was the pastor of that church.
Yeah. Absolutely.
She was the one leading her family and all the people by the river and getting,
Mm-hmm.
she was doing that,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Esther saved her people.
There's even a passage, I believe it's David, where he, like a quick passage where they don't really talk about David's mom,
Hmm.
but there's like a quick little passage that's like, oh, the way David's mom poured into
Yeah.
him as a child, like even in
Yeah.
motherhood,
Right.
like every woman's platform will look different,
Hmm.
but we
But
are
they're
given
all important.
platforms. Oh,
But
they're
they're all
all
important.
important. They're
Yeah.
absolutely all
Yeah.
important. And so I mean, just like the platform that you're given or the platform that you feel, God has called you to, it may feel out of reach, but if God's called you there,
Yeah.
he's gonna get you there.
He's going
And
to
sometimes
empower
that
you
takes,
and do it.
absolutely, but you better be willing to walk through those valleys.
Hmm.
You better be willing to stand strong
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
not be manipulated by emotions, not be manipulated by people or by Satan, and keep walking no
Yeah.
matter where it takes you to
Yeah.
get there.
Right. Like you said that, and I remember, the Lord gave me a similar chastisement about, getting in the word on my own and not just studying the word for when I had to prepare for something. But I was reading through the book of Kings, right? Another fun book of the Bible.
You
But
just love those
but
books.
ladies, if you follow it and you follow the path of the kings of Israel,
Mm-hmm.
every time that the king was raised by a godly mother, they were good kings.
Yeah.
But follow the trail. Every time they were raised by a pagan or a non-follower of God, that the king had married someone from another whatever,
Mm-hmm.
now it wasn't about different races, it was about different cultures worshiping false gods, right?
Mm-hmm.
But every time they had married someone who followed Baal or some other false
Mm-hmm.
god, that
Yeah.
king was horrible.
Yep.
And it took someone being raised once again by a godly mom
Mm-hmm.
that Israel got back on track. It happened so many times.
Yep.
Maybe I don't want to be um all inclusive because it'd be that one or two that did it anyway. But when
Yeah.
they were raised by godly women, those are the kings that honored the Lord and brought Israel back into fellowship with God, you know?
Mm.
And
Absolutely.
there is your first ministry is 100% your family.
Absolutely.
100%.
Your
Pour into your
children, your
husband, pour
spouse.
into
Yep.
your kids. Um, but
What does it say about um a woman who submits? A
mm,
woman who submits can lead her husband to the Lord.
right. Yeah.
I I remember reading that and thinking, like, I always thought, like, oh, submission is for the godly husbands.
Mhm.
But
No.
when God calls you to be a submissive wife, we're talking about a relationship with Him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even in that passage, it's like, oh, no, no, no. Even
Mhm.
in something that may not feel good
Yeah.
doing, you can lead even your
Yeah.
husband to the Lord.
Right. Yeah. And there's a story, and I can't remember which evangelist it is, and I because these are so like unscripted conversations, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I would have researched beforehand, but I remember hearing a story of one of the evangelists that back in the day, and he was an abusive alcoholic, didn't know the Lord. The wife was the one that would go to tent meeting back at, those tent
Mm-hmm.
meetings. And one day he told her, if you go to this tent meeting, you go to that service, don't even come home. Well, her first priority was the Lord. So she goes. She comes back and the door is locked. So
Hmm.
she sleeps on the stoop of the doorstep that night.
Mm-hmm.
That morning he gets up, opens the door to get the newspaper or whatever he was doing.
Sure.
And there she was. And she
Hmm.
gets off the stoop, the front porch,
Mm-hmm.
greets him, goes in, makes him breakfast.
Oh boy.
And it was that act of like, whoa, that led it, like he broke down, gave his heart
Mm-hmm.
to the Lord, and ended up becoming a voice in the church. It wasn't
Hmm.
the however many times she had preached, you need to get
Mm-hmm.
saved. It was her acting out the gospel.
Absolutely.
It was her being that godly wife and saying, it is God first,
Mm-hmm.
then it is you.
Mm-hmm.
So I will submit to you as long as we're submitted to the Lord. But if it takes me from doing what God wants me to do, then that's where I have to say sorry. But I
Mm-hmm.
will show you that you are next in line.
Yep.
And for ladies who are watching this, who have husbands who are even antagonistic to the gospel, not just,
Mm.
that
Not willing to go
you're not
or
willing to go. He goes to church with me, but you can tell he's not really
yeah.
involved. I'm talking about even if your husband is antagonistic and like
Mm-hmm.
anti-church, you be the church to him. You
Absolutely.
know, we are blessed now that we do have online church. But if you literally can't
Mm-hmm.
safely go to church because whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you got online church, but
Yeah,
you be the church to your spouse, number one.
absolutely.
And like you said, that the Bible says that will lead your
I
husband to the Lord. But
absolutely.
wow.
That walk of obedience, and we as women are called to it too. We
Yeah.
we as women are we are absolutely given big calls,
Yeah.
and that does come with obedience. It's the same as men. And I would even like to say for women who are already high in leadership
Hmm.
to also, take on that mothering role,
Come
like you said.
on.
Oh, absolutely. That mothering role of, what can a godly woman do for other women
Yeah.
in the church
Yeah.
who don't know, who might be with an antagonistic husband, who might feel pulled between their family or other ministries or things like that, or just might be lost or feel like they're in a box, who feel like, and I will say this, even in my box, I had women around me. I had women who did pour into me and
Hmm.
who saw where I was, and they prayed over me, and they did not blink an eye once when I said it's time for me to go. They said, "All right, I
Yeah.
want to see where he takes you."
Right.
And they furthered me along into a place where other women such
Yeah.
as yourself are now also seeing this and say, "All right, let's go even further. Let's keep going." That
Yeah.
mothering role of a godly woman
Hmm.
doesn't just have to be for, with children, but for the
Yeah.
people around
Right.
us.
Yeah. You know, we talk about the mountaintop, right? When you do make it to the mountaintop, it's not for you to be there alone. It's for you to reach down and help someone else get up
Mm-hmm.
from the valley. And I think if we can, as women, as believers in general, if we can start thinking of it that way, rather than once I get there, I've made it. Get
Mm-hmm.
there, and I get there so that I can help someone else get there. It's
Yeah.
not for me to be there. It's for me to see how many people can I take with me?
Yeah.
Right? How many people can I
Yep.
tether to my husband? I did it a little, but he was into rock climbing like majorly when we were younger.
Yeah.
And you're tethered to that person behind you, right? And we're tethered so we can help pull each other up, bring
Absolutely.
safety, because you're tethered to
Mm-hmm.
someone for
Yeah.
safety, but also because you can help that next person. And if we can get that mindset, you know, and I wonder sometimes because the world really does, I think, pit women against each other.
100%.
It really does. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's if I make it to the top, you can't make it to the top because there's no room for both of us up here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've got to be as antagonistic to you because if you get there before me, I may never make it. And that is
Yep.
not the kingdom of God.
Nope.
And we, as Christians, we need to represent something that's different
Mm-hmm.
than that. And when we start representing something that's different than that, I think maybe, maybe just maybe, we
Mm-hmm.
stay in that valley or we stay hidden
Mm-hmm.
because we're not ready to be the person who's bringing people with us. And the
Yeah.
Lord's like, you know what? I need to keep you hidden for your safety.
Mm-hmm.
I need to keep you hidden for your preparation because when I take you to the mount, when you make it to the mountaintop, you have to be ready to see that person coming next to you
Absolutely.
because you won't be representing me if there's this competition that's happening when I want
Mhm.
everybody on this mountaintop.
Absolutely. And I also think that even in that, competition, there's that, especially with women, there's that age gap that, you
Mm.
know, young women don't always want to like respect women of an
Yeah,
older age that like have wisdom and experience. And then there's women who are of an older age with this wisdom and experience. They're kind of like stuck in their ways and they don't,
yeah,
automatically want to, they kind of are, there's like that judgment towards how young women are doing
yeah,
things and that, and to fuse together, um, especially right now where young women right now they're hungry and they're thirsty, like they want truth, they want God, they want that, they want to understand the pure intentions of how God made them.
yeah,
And I think it's incredibly necessary to fuse that together because to truly, um have women who may be already at that mountaintop, or just have like this the wisdom
yeah,
and the experience
yeah,
to say, hey, you may not be getting here today, but I'm still going to take time out of my
yeah,
day and to show you what you need to learn, or to pray with you, or to even just do life with you. We don't have to be the same age. We don't have to be in the same place. We don't have to possibly be doing the same things, but like let's come together
yeah,
and see what we can gain in the
yeah.
kingdom, and
I
to
love
see,
that.
just to see the ground that we can take as women, because we're coming together from all different valleys and
Yeah.
from all different mountains, and saying, all right, kingdom,
Kingdom.
culture is
Yeah.
including all of us, including all
It's
of our
like,
calls.
it's like, you know, I did a message on this. I don't even know when it was, um, but like I look at the life of Paul, right? And we all need to, I feel like if we start modeling this way, you know, who are you looking up to? Who are you looking eye to eye with? And who are you looking down to?
Mm,
Not down
that's
at,
good.
but down to.
Down
So,
two.
who is your mentor? Who
Mm-hmm.
are you looking up to? Who is that person that I know I can go to and who's pouring into me?
Mm-hmm.
Then who is that person I'm looking eye and eye to? Let's be iron sharpening iron.
Absolutely,
I'm
yeah.
doing life with you. We can have fun and do this, but at the same time, you can also be like, girl, you need to pull that together, you know? Who am I doing
Yep.
life with? Who is that eye
Mm-hmm.
to eye? And then who am I looking down to? Okay, I see you. I see you,
Mm-hmm.
sweetheart. Let me help, let me talk. So who am I looking up to? Who is my mentor? Who is my heart and soul? And then who am I mentoring? And
Yeah.
if women were thinking that way, no matter who you are, no matter where you're in life, I don't care if you're 85, who are you? I mean, there may not be a lot of people older than you, but there still could be someone that's more
Absolutely.
emotionally mature, um,
Absolutely.
spiritually, whatever it is. Who am I looking
Yeah.
up to? It's really not necessarily all about age either, but
Yeah.
we should all have someone who's pouring into us.
Mm-hmm.
And we should always have someone that like locking arms on with,
Yep.
and someone that we are pouring into. And if we do that, we won't have the age gaps in generations.
Mm-hmm.
We won't have that.
Nope.
And we will be pulling each other up. So wow, this was great. I mean,
It was
we probably even
amazing.
went technically overtime. I have no idea. It was too good of a conversation, and we're gonna have to do this again because
Yes,
clearly,
please.
when we get into conversation, we can go anywhere about anything. But
Yeah.
but just closing out, if there was one thing, like a motto, a line, a catchphrase, you're saying, ladies, I don't care if you remember anything else we talked about today, but this is what I want you to leave this conversation with, what would it be?
Oh man.
Put you on the spot. Put you on the spot.
Wow. I would say walk the valley. I think that was probably even like stood out to me when you brought that up, but just because that's exactly what God had for me. He had valleys that, oh man, he had valley. I had joy in valleys where you shouldn't have joy. I had peace in valleys where you shouldn't have peace. I had revelation in valleys where you didn't realize that would you'd find. I had healing in valleys. And I've come out of them a better woman, a better child of God, a better person, and somebody that truly is passionate about Jesus more than I ever could be. So don't build the bridge, walk the valley.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on the show. We'll do it again. Don't you worry.
Yes, please.
And I've already got, guys, I got plans for this young lady. So you're gonna see her with some stuff. You're gonna see her.
Can't wait.
Because the anointing's there, the power's there. We don't know each other well. We're just getting to know each other, but you
We
already
will.
have already knitted a place in my heart. And
Me
um,
too.
you really do encapsulate what I feel my calling is, and that is having women emerge and step out of the shadows. And so
Amen.
already a proud mama
I
and
love
see
it.
what's going. So thank you so much. And give your little one a hug for me. He's
I
so
will.
cute.
Thanks
All
for
right.
having me, Lynn.
Thanks.
And have a great time in Atlanta. And I just am praying for Emerge for women
Yeah.
to just feel that revival
Yeah.
and that passion.
Yeah. So, and I'm just praying, I know God has other cities for Emerge to go to. So the next one,
I'm
you're gonna
there.
be a part of that, a part of
I'm
that.
there.
All right. Until the next
Bye,
time.
Lynn.
Bye. Wow. Listen, guys, I I can't even express how meaningful what she said. Walk the valley. And if you are someone right now and you're just like, I don't even know how to even navigate this valley, who are you looking up to? There are people who want to be a part of your life. Join the Emerge community and find us on Facebook, the Emerging Community, where you can be mentored even online. Join the mailing list where you find out where are we having Emerge conferences. How can you host an Emerge conference where we are just encouraging ladies to be everything they can be. But most of all, wherever you are in your process, know that God didn't say he wouldn't take you through trials and struggles. But what he did say is that he would be there with you, that he would be the shepherd that would lead you by the still waters. He'd be the shepherd that would lead you through the green pastures. He's there for you. You may be in the valley, but the mountain is not that far away. So until the next time, keep smiling. And don't forget, share, like, and subscribe. Everything that you do helps bless someone else. So I appreciate you. See you next time. Bye bye.